Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. And Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Back to school, big league fall sports, and then it's just a short hop to the holiday season. All of these things, though, help us kind of forget we're leaving behind those lazy, great days of summer, right? Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs. I am Chris William, and big sports and education will certainly figure prominently into our dialogue on this edition. And not just the Panthers' big early summer announcement move to South Carolina, but the long-established, always simmering sibling rivalry between Raleigh and Charlotte shows up again, this time in the possibility of either community landing a Major League Soccer franchise first. Later on our dialogue, we'll meet the Triangle's best hope for that. Entrepreneur and North Carolina football club owner Steve Malik joins us via Skype. But in a moment, we'll begin this week's dialogue with South Carolina State Senator Wes Climer and Statesville Chamber CEO Shannon Viera. Stay with us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Shannon Viera of the Statesville Chamber of Commerce, Wes Climer, South Carolina Senator, and special guest, Steve Malik, owner and chairman of the North Carolina Football Club.
Welcome to our program. Happy almost back to school. It is back to school.
It's close.
Senator, CEO Viera, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Hey, good to be with you.
You know, Wes, I want to start with you because you were very a big part of the Carolina Panthers relocating headquartered administrative operations to South Carolina. That didn't go, by the way, unnoticed from North Carolina,
right,
as
sure.
you probably know. Why was that important to convince Panther officials to move down there?
Well, so for our community, it's an extraordinary opportunity not only to have a huge capital investment, a $250 million investment that will bring with it hundreds of jobs and potentially lead to the attraction and expansion of hundreds and hundreds more. Secondly, it gives our community a partner, a marquee corporate citizen that we can use as a launching pad to go out around the country, demonstrate that we can deliver on high-profile big projects and try to recruit more economic opportunity back to the people of York County.
So when you talk about economic, clearly it was an economic opportunity story to some degree,
yeah,
right?
Big time.
What was it like internally trying to get this deal done when you had a good part of your constituents, and by the way, respected political leaders, saying we don't want to write a check for economic development? I mean, it's too close. This is my term, Senator, but they're just coming across the state line. Why do we have to give, and again, my term, corporate welfare to clearly a billionaire that already has a lot of leverage?
Well, one, let me clarify, the state of South Carolina is not writing a check to the Panthers. The Panthers, the tax benefit that they will receive is a discount on future taxes. So if they come, they get a discount on their taxes. If they don't come, no discount, right? Yeah. And so I think it is a fair conversation to have. I think it's an important conversation for South Carolina to have. You know, my personal preference would be that we have a much fairer, flatter tax code, one that is more competitive in and of itself so that these sorts of tax incentive packages are no longer necessary. And I believe that the political will in the General Assembly and around the state, particularly in the business community, is driving very quickly in that direction. My view is that tax incentives are a Band-Aid to cover the wound of a bad tax code. And ultimately, we have to fix our tax code to make it much more competitive. So we're talking about not economic development or economic incentives, but economic growth writ large.
So Shannon will bring into this dialogue, because whenever, and again, this is the way I describe it, but whenever economic incentives about a new announcement or existing expansion for a current business that has an economic incentives element tied to it, you get a lot of opponents come out of the woodwork and say, and I'm not for or against it, by the way, but you get a lot of people coming public to say, we don't want to do it. But you always get that element, but yet it doesn't slow down economic incentives. So how do you come down on it? Are economic incentives, are they needed? Is it supposed to happen because everyone else is going to do it? And especially given the Panthers example that we just talked about.
Well, I think North Carolina is definitely unique in the sense of how they do manage their economic development incentives compared to South Carolina. I mean, I think we all can agree to that as far as how it's how the process happens. Yeah. So there's, we have a little bit more opportunity to compete, but it's just done in a very different way. So I think we do need to have a little bit more structure to it, but I also think the bigger issue comes down to, I think internally people understand what the incentives are and what they're meant to be for, is to like you said, Wes, it's not necessarily we're giving them money, but there's land, there's sewer and water, there are tax breaks. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things that happen. It's not just, hey, we're writing you a check to come over. But the impression is to people that aren't in the weeds with that is that, oh, we're just writing a check over. I hear a lot of what I hear as the Chamber of Commerce, even though we have an economic development office, they do work really hard to compete with surrounding areas. And we're in a smaller outside area of Charlotte, so we have some really great assets. We have great roads. We have 2 major highways that come through there, so we're a very viable area for people that want to be a little bit close to everything, but not in the middle of it all. I hear a lot of feedback from the smaller businesses. They don't understand how they are not getting an incentive. Why I'm a small business owner, why can't I get the same incentive? So I do a lot more work on that level with not probably the mid-sized business. They're getting ready to expand, and how can the city of Statesville or the county of Iredell help me personally? So we've been seeing a lot more of that in our area, of doing a lot more of the smaller mid-sized business incentives, and I think that's a new idea, and I think we're working really hard. We've had one project that's come through that was kind of approved, and then another business heard about it and they say, how do we jump into this? So it's like we're starting our own standards doing that.
Let's jump to something a little bit more seasonal, back to school.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, we're staring down the barrel of the kids going back to school, and life's changing once again back to normal, if that is normal.
Yeah.
Senator Climer of South Carolina, Jay Lucas, Speaker of the House in South Carolina, had made a big deal that education was going to be reformed and there would be big moves in the Palmetto State. The scorecard wasn't quite as good as many had hoped. So what happens now? Where is education reform in South Carolina?
So in the last session, a big transformative education bill passed in the House. Got over to the Senate. The Senate Education Committee spent a great deal of time, dozens of meetings, sort of finessing that bill. It now awaits consideration in the Senate when the Senate reconvenes in January.
So the momentum of the idea of major education reform is not dead, it's just not complete. Is that fair to say?
Incomplete, and I would be very surprised if the next session concludes without action on that bill. And I think, frankly, I think everybody wants things to hurry up and get stuff done.
Yeah, sure.
But in this case, when you're working with the subject matter that is so complex and so far-reaching in its consequences, I think ultimately the end product will benefit by having this additional season where legislators can hear from their constituents, can hear from stakeholders, can hear from teachers about how best to reposition our education system going forward.
Shannon, in North Carolina, there's a lot of attention and a lot of expectation around education. It's not called education reform, but it is education reform.
Yeah, we have several bills as well. We have 2 that we're following as a chamber. One of them has to do with the school calendar, just making some adjustments to that so that our calendar actually starts much earlier. Our kids are already in school. They've been in school for a couple of weeks. So that's a huge adjustment. They are usually going back about the third week of August. We're talking they started the second week of August. So huge difference. And a lot of that push is to get calendar aligned with testing dates, to get some of the, especially in the high school level, a lot of their testing is done after the winter break. So we're trying to move that forward. But also we have early college programs and trying to align with our community college schedule so that we're just more aligned. So this year is going to be a tough year for students and teachers and everybody just getting used to that.
And the last the last point on this, do you get any pushback from tourism around
Yes,
that?
I would say tourism lobbyists are really pushing on that. I know there's several other counties that are pushing for this for a change in the calendar schedule. Right now they've designated our county as a year-round school, which is how they're able to adjust.
So that's how you get around it.
But
yeah, I'm sorry. Parks, Recreation, Tourism in South Carolina is pretty successful, but they're also successful in holding back the change in the calendar year.
Those exact tensions, the exact debate is ongoing in South Carolina. My preference ultimately would be to see local districts, local communities have substantially more autonomy over making schedules that best suit the needs of their students and their communities.
I would say the only other school issue that would affect economic development is the scorecard. The scorecard in North Carolina, it's 80% testing and 20% the progress in between. Yeah. And really we'd love to see that flipped to 2080, but right now we're looking for at least a 50-50 to align the school card so that if somebody's coming in to move to the state of North Carolina and they look at a school and it's a F or D school, does that really tell you the story of the school? It usually does not.
Okay. Thank you. That'll be the last word. We're going to bring our guest on. You know, our guest over the last couple of decades has built a lot of his own critical mass and personal wealth through healthcare and medical tech. He has also been intensely focused on building soccer and encouraging interest in what is called the beautiful game. He is owner and chairman of the North Carolina FC and North Carolina Courage of the National Women's Soccer League. He joins us now via Skype from his home in North Carolina's Triangle in Raleigh. Steve Malik, welcome to the program. Steve, good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Steve, I've got to start out with the most obvious, and that is, you know, there's this long simmering civil rivalry, and you're smiling because you know it's true, between Charlotte and Raleigh. Who does what better? It's this yin and yang between these two cities that have gone on for a while, and now Major League Soccer has announced expansion teams, and both Raleigh and Charlotte think that they have a pretty good idea. I want to ask you, how would you handicap the ability for Raleigh to get it before Charlotte?
Well, I think they're both great markets, and I hope we both get it. I think the rivalry between us would be great. It'd be like Seattle and Portland, or New York's, or even Los Angeles. And at the same time, of course, we think we've got some advantages. And Charlotte has Mr. Tepper, so he certainly is a successful guy that is putting the word out there that feels pretty confident.
How do you tease out the difference between what you've done at what's called NCFC, or the North Carolina Football Club, and of course the North Carolina Courage, the men's and the women's squads, respectively? How do you tease out what is emotional about the game and what you've been able to, the success you've been able to have, and not just the win-loss records, but as a business, and how you would expect MLS to perform in the Triangle and or Charlotte and or the Carolinas? Is it a hope that you think MLS is going to do well, or is this something where you're much more convinced that it's a solid investment?
Well, I don't think that most clubs are making money. It's a situation that you're doing it for the community, you're doing it for the fans. You've got a long-term hope and expectation to increase asset value, but on an operational basis, you've got some challenges. Now that said, we did do a study. We used Legends, and they came in and looked at the demographics of our area. They look a lot like Charlotte's, and our expectation is to draw about 22,000 per game. which fits in with the rest of MLS. That's a pretty good average. And that's why we're looking at building a soccer-specific stadium that's in an urban environment that, in Raleigh, we need an entertainment district. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to bring people in and give them a whole game day experience that's positive, bars, fun things to do, and lots of other events besides soccer.
So this is, and just to ask the same question maybe a different way, you've done this with businesses. You have a high degree of confidence that if an MLS were to choose Raleigh and were to choose your project, that you would feel like it was sustainable and at least, maybe not profitable right away, but sustainable to lead to profitability.
Yeah, to be clear and not to take any pressure off the rivalry, we're going to be successful either way. Without MLS, we've got a strong men's club, a strong women's club, the best in the world, and we're going to have lots of other events that are going to be very positive.
Thank you. Shannon, question?
Yeah. Hey, Steve. I think sports tourism is real important to any community, whether it's at the franchise level of what we're talking about or just even at the local level. How do you feel that having your soccer team would advance the sport in your area, and how would you kind of promote that to sort of increase the awareness and honestly the fun and getting families involved to a sport that is really probably quickly gaining some momentum as a premier sport for people to attend and come to your stadium?
So we already have the largest youth to pro organization in the country with 14,000 kids. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of parents, as you mentioned, and we're growing. We have other parts of the community that we could add another 6,000 to 7,000 quite shortly. And so, frankly, we do very well with community engagement. This is a club that now is under our flag, but has a 40-year history. So Raleigh has always done very, very well with the sport, been one of the national leaders. And it's great, by the way, to have women as well with the men. Half of those players are girls. Mm-hmm. And we do a great job of, frankly, around the country, even driving tournaments. In soccer, college coaches don't always go out and have the budgets that American football does. Mm-hmm. And so we bring and showcase those kids in a tournament series where we actually are very impactful to Raleigh's hotel business. When you talk about the business of sport, we actually generate about 15%, the largest portion of our interlocal tax funds, essentially hotel, motel, and prepared food taxes.
Wes, question?
Yeah, a quick question on the sort of the economics of your development, and specifically as it relates to the use of the opportunity zone. My understanding, or maybe my assumption, is that around the country there's some finite pool of capital that will find that sort of arrangement attractive. And so if you're in a state or an area that would seek to double down on that opportunity to really make a stab at revitalizing underdeveloped areas of your state or your community, do you think it makes sense for individual states to look at some form of layering a state tax benefit on top of the opportunity zone? And if so, how would that look? And if not, why not?
Well, Senator, I think that's a great point. And of course, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you're a senator, you think of it on the state level. But I think it also makes sense for local communities as well. You think about Raleigh and Wake County, and we're talking about asking them for some help with taxes that can only be used for tourism. Sorry, I think the Skype cut that off a little there. Yes, sir. But, it does make sense on a state level as well. I don't think those funds are necessarily finite. They're looking for good projects. But that kind of stimulus is a great use to leverage public funds.
Let me come back to something around kind of the business of it all. And Steve, if the economy turns, it's the 10th year of an expanding economy. This is one of the longest expansions in U.S. history. I mean, there's no denying that. And now are we going to talk ourselves into a slowdown? If and when a slowdown comes, is that something that can take the air out of this balloon? In other words, would MLS say, we're going to hold off on expanding? Would that be maybe not a mortal wound to your project, but it could be a big enough wound where you would pull back? So if the economy slowed and MLS put the brakes on any further expansion for a short time?
Well, I don't think the MLS expansion is a critical aspect for the project that we're talking about. $2 billion, and of that, $150 million is the stadium. So, we're going to be building commercial space. We're going to be building retail. We're going to be building the entertainment zone. And Raleigh's done great with every project that my partner John Kane has put up is leased virtually immediately. So you look at the hotel rooms, for instance. Our convention center really needs access to more hotel rooms to grow, and we're talking about 1,200 hotel rooms. So if there's a recession, might we do fewer of that, and fill demand as the economy is prepared for that? Of course. For the stadium, I think we've got 35 dates with soccer already. And while MLS would be great and we need a stadium to be competitive, we're going to make it work with USL and NWSL, our men's and women's teams as we have it. There's lots of communities our size that are drawing 15,000, 18,000 a game in the leagues that we're in, and with a great environment around it, we're going to be able to do that.
We've got less than 2 minutes left, guys, and I want to do a quick follow-up. So, Steve, when I listen to you talk about the project and the place you want to put it in the Triangle in Raleigh, and I think about the development as you've just described it, that it's not fully dependent on any MLS or anything else, that it's going to be inherently about the project itself. I can't help but think about, and this is not naming names, but Jim Goodman did the same thing in Durham. And you're smiling because you know it, and I know you know Jim, but American Tobacco went through a renovation. Then you had DPAC, or Durham Performing Arts Center. Then you had Bull Durham, or the Durham Bull Complex. Is that a blueprint for you? And we have less than a minute left.
Well, I don't think we have to look very far to see what it can do when you bring the right kind of development. You look today at what's going on in Durham, it's pretty amazing.
What's the biggest thing that you worry about around this? And you've got about 30 seconds.
It's just a challenge to get through the whole process, and I'm looking forward to standing in the owner's box when we open the stadium.
Well, Steve, thanks for joining us on the program. And I know we didn't even get a chance for you to talk about the gals on the female squad and how well they did during the Nationals and the World Cup. So our congratulations to you and all the ladies, and thank you. Please come back so we can talk a little bit more in detail about this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Senator, thank you.
Always
Shannon,
pleasure.
thank you for being on the program. Thank you for joining us. We hope your weekend is good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Sonoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.